Hello, my name is Tony Walker, and I am the narrator of the Classic Ghost Stories podcast. Join us this week for a comic yet horrific story by Seabury Quinn called The House of Horrors. What twisted science festers here? Summoned to aid a young woman on a stormy night, two doctors instead find themselves seeking refuge in imposing Marston Hall. But what begins as a simple detour soon descends into a grotesque maze of obsession and unholy science. Is any arrival mere chance, or are dark forces at play? Join us as we confront the unnerving secrets residing in the House of Horrors.
Everybody dies, don't they? Everybody come back, don't they? Isn't that so?
You tried to get into the locked room today, didn't you?
How do the dead come back, Mother? What's the secret of the dead come back?
The House of Horror by Seabury Quinn. Morbleu, friend Trowbridge, have a care! Jules de Grandin warned as my lurching motor car almost ran into the brimming ditch beside the rain-soaked road. I wrenched the steering wheel viciously and swore softly under my breath as I leaned forward, striving vainly to pierce the curtains of rain which shut us in. "No use, old fellow," I confessed, turning to my companion. "We're lost. That's all there is to it." "Ah," he laughed shortly. "Do you just begin to discover that fact, my friend? Parbleu, I have known it this last half hour." Throttling my engine down, I crept along the concrete roadway, peering through my streaming windscreen and storm curtains for some familiar landmark, but nothing but blackness, wet and impenetrable, met my eyes. 2 hours before, answering an insistent phone call, the Grandin and I had left the security of my warm office to administer a dose of toxin-antitoxin to an Italian labourer's child who lay choking with diphtheria in a hut at the workmen's settlement where the new branch of the railway was being put through. The cold, driving rain and the Stygian darkness of the night had misled me when I made a detour round the railway cut, and for the past hour and a half I had been feeling my way over unfamiliar roads as futilely as a lost child wandering in the woods. "Grâce à Dieu!" the Grandin exclaimed, seizing my arm with both his small, strong hands. "A light! See, there it shines in the night. Come, let us go to it. Even the meanest hovel is preferable to this so villainous rain." I peeped through a joint in the curtains and saw a faint, intermittent light flickering through the driving rain some 200 yards away. "All right," I acquiesced, climbing from the car. "We've lost so much time already, we probably couldn't do anything for the Vivianti child, and maybe these people can put us on the right road anyway." Plunging through puddles like miniature lakes soaked by the wind-driven rain, barking our shins again and again on invisible obstacles we made for the light, finally drawing up to a large square house of red brick, fronted by an imposing white-pillared porch. Light streamed out through the fanlight over the white door and from the 2 tall windows flanking the portal. "Parbleu! A house of circumstance, this," the Grandin commented, mounting the porch and banging lustily at the polished brass knocker. I wrinkled my forehead in thought while he rattled the knocker a second time. "Strange I can't remember this place," I muttered. "I thought I knew every building within 30 miles, but this is a new one." "Ah bah," the Grandin interrupted. "Always you must be casting a wet blanket on the parade, friend Trowbridge. First you insist on losing us in the middle of a sacré rainstorm, then when I, Jules de Grandin, find us a shelter from the weather, you must needs waste time in wondering why it is you do not know the place. Morbleu! You will refuse shelter because you have never been presented to the master of the house if I do not watch you. I fear." "But I ought to know the place, de Grandin," I protested. "It's certainly imposing enough to—" My defence was cut short by the sharp click of a lock, and the wide white door swung inwards before us. We strode over the threshold, removing our dripping hats as we did so, and turned to address the person who had opened the door. "Why," I began, and stared about me in open-mouthed surprise. "Name of a little blue man," said Jules de Grandin, and added his incredulous stare to mine. As far as we could see, we were alone in the mansion's imposing hall. Straight before us, perhaps for 40 feet, ran a corridor of parquetry flooring covered here and there by rich-hued oriental rugs. White-panelled walls, adorned with oil paintings of imposing-looking individuals, rose for 18 feet or so to a beautifully frescoed ceiling, and a graceful, curving staircase swept upwards from the farther end of the room. Candles in cut-glass sconces lighted the high-ceilinged apartment. The hospitable glow from a log fire burning under the high white marble mantel lent an air of homely coziness to the place, but of anything living, human or animal, there was no faintest trace or sign. Click! Behind us, the heavy outer door swung to silently on well-oiled hinges, and the automatic lock latched firmly. "Death of my life!" the Grandin murmured, reaching for the door's silver-plated knob and giving it a vigorous twist. "Par le moustache du diable, friend Trowbridge, it is locked. Truly, perhaps it had been better if we had remained outside in the rain." "Not at all, I assure you, my dear sir," a rich, mellow voice answered him from the curve of the stairs. "Your arrival was nothing less than providential, gentlemen." Coming towards us, walking heavily with the aid of a stout cane, was an unusually handsome man, attired in pyjamas and dressing-gown, a sort of nightcap of flowered silk on his white head, slippers of softest morocco on his feet. "You are a physician, sir?" he asked, glancing inquiringly at the medicine case in my hand. "Yes," I answered, "I am Dr. Samuel Trowbridge from Harrisonville, and this is Dr. Jules de Grandin of Paris, who is my guest." "Ah," replied our host, "I am very, very glad to welcome you to Marston Hall, gentlemen. It so happens that one of my daughter is quite ill, and I have been unable to obtain medical aid for her on account of my infirmities and the lack of a telephone. If I may trespass on your charity to attend my poor child, I shall be delighted to have you as my guests for the night. If you will lay aside your coats—" He paused expectantly. "Ah, thank you," as we hung our dripping garments over a chair. "You will come this way, please?" We followed him, up the broad stairs and down an upper corridor to a tastefully furnished chamber where a young girl, 15 years of age perhaps, lay propped up with a pile of diminutive pillows. Annabel, my love, here are 2 doctors to see you," the old gentleman called softly. The girl moved her fair head with a weary, peevish motion and whimpered softly in her sleep, but gave no further recognition of our presence. "And what have been her symptoms, if you please, monsieur?" the Grandin asked, as he rolled back the cuffs of his jacket and prepared to make an examination. "Sleep," replied our host, "just sleep. Some time ago she suffered from influenza. Lately she has been given to fits of protracted slumber, from which I cannot awaken her. I fear she may have contracted sleeping sickness, sir. I am told it sometimes follows influenza." The Grandin passed his small, pliable hands rapidly over the girl's cheeks in the region of her ears, felt rapidly along her neck over the jugular vein, then raised a puzzled glance to me. "Have you some laudanum and aconite in your bag, friend Trowbridge?" he asked. "There's some morphine," I answered, and aconite, but no laudanum." "No matter." He waved his hand impatiently, bustling over to the medicine case and extracting 2 small phials from it. "No matter, this will do as well. Some water, if you please, monsieur." He turned to the father, a medicine bottle in each hand. "But the Grandin," I began, when a sudden kick from one of his slender, heavily shod feet nearly broke my shin. "Grandin, do you think that's proper medication?" I finished lamely. "Oh, maybe, undoubtedly," he replied. "Nothing else would do in this case. Water, if you please, monsieur," he repeated, again addressing the father. I stared at him in ill-disguised amazement as he extracted a pellet from each of the bottles and quickly ground them to powder, while the old gentleman filled a tumbler with water from the porcelain pitcher which stood on the chintz-draped washstand in the corner of the chamber. He was as familiar with the arrangement of my medicine case as I was, I knew, and knew that my files were arranged by numbers instead of being labelled. Deliberately, I saw, he had passed over the morphine and aconite, and had chosen 2 bottles of plain, unmedicated, sugar-of-milk pills. What his objection was, I had no idea, but I watched him measure out 4 teaspoonfuls of water, dissolve the powder in it, and pour the sham medication down the unconscious girl's throat. "Good," he proclaimed, as he washed the glass with meticulous care. "She will rest easy until the morning, monsieur. When daylight comes, we shall decide on further treatment. Will you now permit that we retire?" He bowed politely to the master of the house, who returned his courtesy and led us to a comfortably furnished room farther down the corridor. "See here, de Grandin," I demanded, when our host had wished us a pleasant good night and closed the door upon us. "What was your idea in giving the child an impotent dose like that?" "Shh!" He cut me short with a fierce whisper. "That young girl, mon ami, is no more suffering from encephalitis than you and I. There is no characteristic swelling of the face or neck, no diagnostic hardening of the jugular vein. Her temperature is a bit subnormal, it is true, but upon her breath I detected the odor of chloral hydrate. For some reason good, I hope, but bad, I fear. She is drugged." And I thought it best to play the fool and pretend I believed the man's statements. Pardieu, the fool who knows himself no fool has an immense advantage over the fool who believes himself one, my friend. But me no buts, friend Trowbridge. Remember how the door of this house opened with none to touch it. Recall how it closed behind us in the same way, and observe this, if you will. Stepping softly, he crossed the room, pulled aside the chintz curtains at the window, and tapped lightly on the frame which held the thick plate glass panes. "Regardez-vous!" he ordered, tapping the frame a second time. Like every other window I had seen in the house, this one was of the casement type, small panes of heavy glass being sunk into lattice-like frames. Under de Grandin's directions, I tapped the latter and found them not painted wood as I had supposed, but stoutly welded and bolted metal. Also, to my surprise, I found the turnbuckles for opening the casement were only dummies, the metal frames being actually securely bolted to the stone seals. To all intents, we were as firmly incarcerated as though serving a sentence in the state penitentiary. "The door," I began, but he shook his head. Obeying his gesture, I crossed the room and turned the handle lightly. It twisted under the pressure of my fingers, but though we had heard no warning click of lock or bolt, the door itself was as firmly fastened as though nailed shut. "Why?" I asked stupidly. "What's it all mean, de Grandin?" "Je sais quoi," he answered with a shrug, "but one thing I know. I like not this house, friend Trowbridge. Above the hissing of the rain against the windows and the howl of the sea wind about the gables, there suddenly rose a scream, wire-edged with inarticulate terror, freighted with utter transcendental anguish of body and soul. "Grand Dieu!" He threw up his head like a hound hearing the call of the pack from far away. "Did you hear it too, friend Trowbridge?" "Of course," I answered, every nerve in my body trembling in horripilation with the echo of the hopeless wail. "Pardieu!" he repeated. "I like this house less than ever now. Come, Let us move this dresser before our door. It is safer that we sleep behind the barricades this night, I think. We blocked the door, and I was soon sound asleep. Trowbridge, my friend! The Grandin drove a sharp elbow into my ribs. Wake up, I beseech you. Name of a green goat, you lie like one dead, save for your so abominable snoring. Eh? I answered sleepily, thrusting myself deeper beneath the voluminous bedclothes. Despite the unusual occurrences of the night, I was tired to the point of exhaustion and fairly drunk with sleep. Up, arise, my friend, he ordered, shaking me excitedly. The coast is clear, I think, and it is high time we did some exploring. Rats, I scoffed, disinclined to leave my comfortable couch. What's the use of wandering about a strange heist to gratify a few unfounded suspicions? The girl might have been given a dose of chloral hydrate, but the chances are that her father thought he was helping her when he gave it. As for these trick devices for opening and locking doors, the old man apparently lives here alone and has installed these mechanical aids to lessen his work. He has to hobble around with a cane, you know. Ah, my companion assented sarcastically. And that scream we heard, did he install that as an aid to his infirmities also? Perhaps the girl woke up with a nightmare, I hazarded, but he made an impatient gesture. Perhaps the moon is composed of green cheese also, he replied. Up and dress, my friend. This house should be investigated while yet there is time. Attend me. But 5 minutes ago, through this very window, I did observe Monsieur, our host, attired in a raincoat, depart from his own front door, and without his cane. Parbleu! He did skip as agilely as any boy, I assure you. Even now, he is almost at the spot where we abandoned your automobile. What he intends doing there, I know not. What I intend doing, I know full well. Do you accompany me, or not? Oh, I suppose so, I agreed, crawling from the bed and slipping into my clothes. How are you going to get past that locked door? He flashed me one of his sudden smiles, shooting the points of his little blonde moustache upwards like the horns of an inverted crescent. Observe, he ordered, displaying a short length of thin wire. In the days when woman's hair was still a crowning glory, what mighty deeds a lady could encompass with a hairpin. Pardieu, there was one little grisette in Paris who showed me some tricks in the days before the war. Regard me, if you please. Deftly, he thrust the pliable loop of wire into the keyhole, twisting it tentatively back and forth, at length pulling it out and regarding it carefully. Très bien, he muttered, as he reached into an inside pocket, bringing out a heavier bit of wire. See, he displayed the finer wire. With this I take an impression of that lock's tumblers. Now, quickly he bent the heavier wire to conform to the waved outline of the lighter lip. Voila! I have a key. And he had. The lock gave readily to the pressure of his improvised key, and we stood in the long dark hall, staring about us, half curiously, half fearfully. This way, if you please, the Grandin ordered. First, we will look in upon la jeunesse to see how it goes with her. We walked on tiptoe down the corridor, entered the chamber where the girl lay, and approached the bed. She was lying with her hands folded upon her breast in the manner of those composed for their final rest, her wide, periwinkle blue eyes staring sightlessly before her, the short, tightly curled ringlets of her blonde bobbed hair surrounding her drawn, pallid face, like a golden nimbus encircling the ivory features of a saint on some carved icon. My companion approached the bed softly, placing one hand upon the girl's wrist with professional precision. Temperature low, her pulse weak, he murmured, checking off her symptoms. Complexion pale to the point of lividity. Now for the eyes. Sleeping, her pupils should have been contracted. while they should now be dilate. Dieu de Dieu! Trowbridge, my friend, come here. Look, he commanded, pointing to the apathetic girl's face. Those eyes, grand Dieu, those eyes! It is sacrilege, nothing else. I looked into the girl's face, then started back with a half-suppressed cry of horror. Asleep as she had been when we first saw her, the child had been pretty to the point of loveliness. Her features were small and regular, clean-cut as those of a face in a cameo. The tendrils of her light yellow hair had lent her a dainty, ethereal charm comparable to that of a Dresden china shepherdess. It had needed but the raising of her delicate, long-lashed eyelids to give her face the animation of some laughing sprite playing truant from fairyland. Her lids were raised now, but the eyes they unveiled were no clear, joyous windows of a tranquil soul. Rather, they were the peepholes of a spirit in torment. The irises were a lovely shade of blue, it's true, but the optics themselves were things of horror. Rolling grotesquely to right and left, they peered futilely in opposite directions, lending to her sweet, pale face the half-ludicrous, wholly hideous expression of a bloating frog. Good heavens, I exclaimed, turning from the deformed girl with a feeling of disgust akin to nausea. What a terrible affliction! The Grandin made no reply, but bent over the girl's still form, gazing intently at her malformed eyes. "It is not natural," he announced. "The muscles have been tampered with and tampered with by someone who is a master hand at surgery. Will you get me your syringe and some strychnine, friend Trowbridge? This poor one is still unconscious." I hastened to our bedroom and returned with a hypodermic and stimulant, then stood beside him watching eagerly as he administered a strong injection. The girl's narrow chest fluttered as the powerful drug took effect, and the pale lids dropped for a second over her repulsive eyes. Then, with a sob which was half moan, she attempted to raise herself on her elbow, fell back again, and, with apparent effort, gasped, "The mirror! Let me have the mirror! Oh, tell me it isn't true! Tell me it was a trick of some sort! Oh, the horrible thing I saw in the glass couldn't have been I, was it?" "Tiens, ma petite," the Grandin replied, "but you speak in riddles. What is it you would know?" Hey, the girl faltered weakly, forcing her trembling lips to frame the words. "That horrible old man showed me a mirror a little while ago and said the face in it was mine. Oh, it was horrible, horrible." "Eh, what is this?" the Grandin demanded on a rising note. "He? Horrible old man? Are you not his daughter? Is he not your father?" "No," the girl gasped, so low her denial was scarcely audible. "I was driving home from Macclesfield last, though I forget when it was, but it wasn't night, and my tyres punctured. I think there must have been glass on the road, for the shoes were cut to ribbons. I saw the light in his house and came to ask for help. An old man who I thought he was so nice and kind let me in and said he was all alone here and about to eat dinner and asked me to join him. I ate some or some, I don't remember what it was. And the next thing I knew, he was standing by me bed, holding a mirror up to me and telling me it was my face I saw in the glass. Oh, please, please tell me it was some terrible trick he played on me. I'm not truly hideous, am I?" "Morbleu!" the Grandin muttered softly, tugging at the ends of his moustache. "What is all this?" To the girl he said, "But of course not. You are like a flower, mademoiselle, a little flower that dances in the wind. You—" "And my eyes, they aren't," she interrupted with piteous eagerness. "Please tell me they aren't." "Mais non, ma chère," he assured her. "Your eyes are like the pervenche that mirrors the sky in springtime. They are—" "Let me see the mirror, please," she interrupted in an anxious whisper. "I'd like to see for myself if you, feel all weak inside." She lapsed back against the pillow, her lids mercifully veiling the hideously distorted eyes, and restoring her face to tranquil beauty. "Cordieu!" the Grandin breathed. The chloral reasserted itself none too soon for Jules de Grandin's comfort, friend Trowbridge. Sooner would I have gone to the rack than have shown that pitiful child her face in a mirror. But what's it all mean? I asked. She says she came here, and the rest remains for us to find out, I think, he replied evenly. Come, we lose time, and to lose time is to be caught, my friend. The Grandin led the way down the hall, peering eagerly into each door we passed in search of the owner's chamber, but before his quest was satisfied, he stopped abruptly at the head of the stairs. Observe, friend Trowbridge, he ordered, pointing a carefully manicured forefinger to a pair of buttons, one white, one black, set in the wall. Unless I am more mistaken than I think I am, we have here the key to the situation, or at least to the front door. He pushed vigorously at the white button, then ran to the curve of the stairs to note the result. Sure enough, the heavy door swung open on its hinges of cast bronze, letting gusts of rain drive into the lower hall. Pardieu! He ejaculated. We have here the open sesame. Let us see if we possess the closing secret as well. Press the black button, Trowbridge, my friend, while I watch. I did his bidding, and the delighted exclamation told me the door had closed. Now what? I asked, joining him on the staircase. He pulled first one end, then the other of his diminutive moustache meditatively. The house possesses its attractions, friend Trowbridge, but I believe it would be well if we went out to observe what our friend, le vieillard horrible, does. I like not to have one who shows young girls their disfigured faces in mirrors near our conveyance. Slipping into our raincoats, we opened the door, taking care to place a wad of paper on the sill to prevent its closing tightly enough to latch, and scurried out into the storm. As we left the shelter of the porch, a shaft of indistinct light shone through the rain as my car was swung from the highway and headed towards a depression to the left of the house. "Parbleu, he is a thief, this one!" the Grandin exclaimed excitedly. "Hola, monsieur!" He ran forward, swinging his arms like a pair of semaphores. "What sort of business is it you make with our auto?" The wailing of the storm tore the words from his lips and hurled them away, but the little Frenchman was not to be thwarted. "Pardieu!" he gasped, bending his head against the wind-driven rain. "I will stop this scoundrel, if nom du coq! He has done it!" Even as he spoke, the old man flung open the car's forward door and leaped, allowing the machine to go crashing down a steep embankment into a lake of slimy swamp mud. For a moment, the vandal stood contemplating his work, then burst into a peal of wild laughter, more malignant than any profanity. "Parbleu, robber, apache! You shall laugh from the other side of your mouth," the Grandin promised as he made for the old man. But the other seemed oblivious of our presence. Still chuckling at his work, he turned towards the house, stopped short as a sudden heavy gust of wind shook the trees along the roadway, then started forward with a yell of terror as a great branch torn bodily from a towering oak tree came crashing towards the earth. He might as well have attempted to dodge a meteorite. Like an arrow from the bow of divine justice, the great timber hurtled down, pinning his frail body to the ground like a worm beneath a labourer's brogan. "Trowbridge, my friend," the Grandin announced matter-of-factly, "observe the evil effects of stealing motor cars." We lifted the heavy bough from the prostrate man and turned him over on his back. The Grandin on one side, I on the other. We made a hasty examination, arriving at the same findings simultaneously. His spinal column was snapped like a pipe stem. "You have some last statement to make, monsieur?" the Grandin asked curtly. "If so, you had best be about it. Your time is short." "Yes," the stricken man replied weakly. I meant to kill you, for you might have hit upon my secret. As it is, you may publish it to the world, that all may know what it meant to offend a Marston. In my room, You will find the documents. My pets are in the cellar. She was to have been one of them. The pauses between his words became longer and longer. His voice grew weaker with each labored syllable. As he whispered the last sentence painfully, there was a gurgling sound, and a tiny stream of blood welled up at the corner of his mouth. His narrow chest rose and fell once with a convulsive movement. Then his jaw dropped limply. He was dead. The Grandin remarked. It is a hemorrhage which finished him. A broken rib piercing his lung. I should have guessed it. Come, my friend, let us carry him to the house, then see what it was he meant by that talk of documents and pets. A pest upon the fellow for dying with his riddle, half explained. Did he not know that Jules de Grandin cannot resist the challenge of a riddle? Parbleu, we will solve this mystery, Monsieur le Mort, if we have to hold an autopsy to do so. Oh, for heaven's sake, hush, de Grandin, I besought, shocked at his heartlessness. The man is dead. Oh bon, he returned scornfully. Dead or not, did he not steal your motor car? We laid our gruesome burden on the hall couch and mounted the stairs to the second floor. With de Grandin in the lead, we found the dead man's room and began a systematic search for the papers he had mentioned almost with his last breath. After some time, my companion unearthed a thick, leather-bound portfolio from the lower drawer of a beautiful old mahogany highboy, and spread its wide leaves open on the white, counterpaned bed. He drew forth several papers and held them to the light. We begin to make progress, friend Trowbridge. What is this? He held out a newspaper clipping, cracked from long folding and yellowed with age. It read, Actress jilts surgeon's crippled son on eve of wedding. Declaring she could not stand the sight of his deformity, and that she had engaged herself to him only in a moment of thoughtless pity, Dora Lee, well-known variety actress, last night repudiated her promise to marry John Beresfield Marston, Jr., hopelessly crippled son of Dr. John Beresfield Marston, the well-known surgeon and expert osteologist. Neither the abandoned bridegroom nor his father could be seen by reporters from the Planet last night. Very good. The Grandin nodded. We need not go further with that account. A young woman, it would seem, once broke her promise to marry a cripple, and judging from this paper's date, that was in 1896, here is another. What do you make of it? The clipping he handed me read as follows. Surgeon's son, a suicide. Still sitting in the wheelchair from which he has not moved during his walking hours since he was hopelessly crippled while playing polo in England 10 years ago, John Beresfield Marston, son of the famous surgeon of the same name, was found in his bedroom this morning by his valet. A rubber hose was connected with a gas jet, the other end being held in the young man's mouth. Young Marston was jilted by Dora Lee, a well-known vaudeville actress, on the day before the date set for their wedding 1 month ago. He is reported to have been extremely low-spirited since his desertion by his fiancée. Dr. Marston, the bereaved father, when seen by reporters from the Planet this morning, declared the actress was responsible for his son's death and announced his intention of holding her accountable. When asked if legal proceedings were contemplated, he declined further information. So? The Grandin nodded shortly. Now this one, if you please. The third clipping was brief to the point of curtness. Well-known surgeon retires. Dr. John Beresfield Marston, widely known throughout this section of the country as an expert in operations concerning the bones, has announced his intention of retiring from practice. His house has been sold, and he will move from the city. The record is clear so far, de Grandin asserted, studying the first clipping with raised eyebrows. But, morbleu, my friend, look at this picture. This Dora Lee. Of whom does she remind you, huh? I took the clipping again and looked intently at the illustration of the article announcing young Marston's broken engagement. The woman in the picture was young and inclined to be overdressed in the voluminous, fluffy mode of the days before the Spanish-American War. No one whom I know, I began, but halted abruptly as a sudden likeness struck me. Despite the towering pompadour arrangement of her blonde hair and the unbecoming straw sailor hat above the coiffure, the woman in the picture bore a certain resemblance to the disfigured girl we had seen half an hour before. The Frenchman saw recognition dawn in my face and nodded agreement. "But of course," he said, "now the question is this young girl whose eyes are so out of alignment a relative of this Doralie, or is the resemblance a coincidence? And if so, what lies behind it?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but there must be some connection." "Connection? Of course there is a connection," the Grandin affirmed, rummaging deeper in the portfolio. What is this? Nom du nom, friend Trowbridge, I think I smell the daylight. Look." He held a full-page story from one of the sensational New York dailies before him, his eyes glued to the flowing type and crude coarse-screen halftones of half a dozen young women which composed the article. "What has become of the missing girls?" I read in bold-faced type across the top of the page. "Are sinister, unseen hands reaching out from the darkness to seize our girls from palace and hovel, shop, stage, and office?" the article asked rhetorically. "Where are Ellen Monroe and Dorothy Sawyer and Phyllis Boucher and 3 other lovely light-haired girls who have walked into oblivion during the past year?" I read to the end of the sensational account of the girls' disappearances. The cases seemed fairly similar. Each of the vanished young women had failed to return to her home and had never been accounted for in any manner, and in no instance, according to the newspaper, had there been any assignable reason for voluntary departure. "Parbleu, but he was stupid even for a journaliste," the Grandin asserted as I completed my inspection of the story. "Why, I wager even my good friend Trowbridge has already noticed one important fact, which this writer has treated as though it were as commonplace as the nose on his face." "Sorry to disappoint you, old chap," I answered, "but it looks to me as though the reporters covered the case from every possible angle." So," he replied sarcastically, "morbleu, we shall have to consult the oculist in your behalf when we return home, my friend. Look, I beseech you, upon the pictures of these so totally absent and unaccounted for young women, cher ami, and tell me if you do not observe a certain likeness among them. Not only a resemblance to each other, but to that Mademoiselle Lee who jilted the son of Dr. Marston. Can you see it now? I have pointed it out." "No, what? Yes, of course," I responded, running my eye over the pictures accompanying the story. "By the Lord Harry de Grandin, you're right. You might almost say there is a family resemblance between these girls. You've put your finger on it, I do believe." "Hélas, non," he answered with a shrug. "I have put my finger on nothing as yet, my friend. I reach, I grope, I feel about me like a blind man, tormented by a crowd of naughty little boys, but nothing do the poor fingers of my mind encounter. Ha! Jules de Grandin, you are one great fool. Think, stupid one." He sat on the edge of the bed, cupping his face in his hands and leaning forward till his elbows rested on his knees. Suddenly he sprang erect, one of his elfish smiles passing across his small, regular features. "Nom du chat rouge, my friend. I have it, he announced. The pets, that old stealer of motor cars spoke of. They are in the basement. Pardieu, we will see those pets, cher Trowbridge. With our 4 collective eyes we will see them. Did not that so execrable stealer declare she was to have been one of them? Now, in the name of Satan and brimstone, whom could he have meant by she? If not that unfortunate child with eyes like la grenouille, eh? Why? I began, but he waved me forward. Come, let us go, he urged. I am impatient, I am restless, I am not to be restrained. We shall investigate and see for ourselves what sort of pets are kept by one who shows young girls their deformed faces in mirrors and, parbleu, steals motor cars from my friends. Hurrying down the main staircase, we hunted about for the cellar entrance, finally located the door, and holding above our heads a pair of candles from the hall, began descending a flight of rickety steps into a pitch-black basement, rock-walled, and, judging by its damp, mouldy odour, unfloored save by the bare, moist earth beneath the house. Parbleu! The dungeons of the chateau at Carcassonne are more cheerful than this, the Grandin commented, as he paused at the stairs' foot, holding his candle aloft to make better inspection of the dismal place. I suppressed a shudder of mingled chill and apprehension as I stared at the blank stone walls, unpierced by windows or other openings of any sort, and made ready to retrace my steps. Nothing here, I announced. You can see that with half an eye. The place is as empty as... Perhaps, friend Trowbridge, he agreed, but Jules de Grandin does not look with half an eye. He uses both eyes, and uses them more than once if his first glance does not prove sufficient. Behold that bit of wood on the earth yonder. What do you make of it? A piece of flooring, maybe? I hazarded. Maybe yes, maybe no, he answered. Let us see. Crossing the cellar, he bent above the planks, then turned to me with a satisfied smile. Flooring does not ordinarily have ringbolts in it, my friend, he remarked, bending to seize the iron ring which was made fast to the boards by a stout staple. Ah! As he heaved upwards, the planks came away from the black earth, disclosing a board-lined well about 3 feet square and of uncertain depth. An almost vertical ladder of 2x4 timbers led downward from the trapdoor to the well's impenetrable blackness. Allons, we descend, he commented, turning about and setting his foot on the topmost rung of the ladder. Don't be a fool, I advised. You don't know what's down there. True. His head was level with the floor as he answered, but I shall know with luck in a few moments. Do you come? I sighed with vexation as I prepared to follow him. At the ladder's foot he paused, raising his candle and looking about inquiringly. Directly before us was a passageway through the earth, sealed with heavy planks and shored up with timbers like the lateral workings of a primitive mine. Ah, the plot shows complication, he murmured, stepping briskly into the dark tunnel. Do you come, friend Trowbridge? I followed, wondering what manner of thing might be at the end of the black, musty passage, but nothing but fungus-grown timbers and walls of moist black earth met my questioning gaze. The Grandin preceded me by some paces, and I suppose we had gone 15 feet through the passage, when a gasp of mingled surprise and horror from my companion brought me beside him in 2 long strides. Fastened with nails to the timbers, at each side of the tunnel were a number of white glistening objects which, because of their very familiarity, denied their identity to my wondering eyes. There was no mistaking the things. Even a layman could not have failed to recognize them for what they were. I, as a physician, knew them even better. To the right of the passage hung 14 perfectly articulated skeletons of human legs, complete from foot to ilium, gleaming white and ghostly in the flickering light of the candles. Good heavens, I exclaimed. Sang du diable, Jules, de Grandin commented. Behold what is there, my friend. He pointed to the opposite wall. 14 bony arms, complete from hand to shoulder joint, hung pendulously from the tunnel's upright timbers. Pardieu, de Grandin muttered. I have known men who collected stuffed birds and dried insects. I have known those who stored away Egyptian mummies, even the skulls of men long dead, but never before have I seen a collection of arms and legs. Parbleu, he was cadro, mad as a hatter, this one, or I am much mistaken. So these were his pets, I answered. Yes, the man was undoubtedly mad to keep such a collection, and in a place like this. Poor fellow. Nom du canon, the Grandin broke in. What was that? From the darkness before us there came a queer, inarticulate sound, such as a man might make attempting to speak with a mouth half filled with food, and as though the noise had wakened an echo slumbering in the cavern, the sound was repeated, multiplied again and again, until it resembled the babbling of half a dozen overgrown infants, or an equal number of full-grown imbeciles. Onward! Responding to the challenge of the unknown like a warrior obeying the trumpet's call to charge, the Grandin dashed towards the strange noise, swung about, flashing his candle this side and that, and then, Nom de Dieu, de nom de Dieu, he almost shrieked. Look, friend Trowbridge, look and say that you see what I see, or have I, too, gone mad? Lined up against the wall was a series of 7 small wooden boxes, each with a door composed of upright slats before it, similar in construction to the coops in which country folk pen brooding hens, and no larger. In each of the hutches huddled an object the like of which I had never before seen, even in the terrors of nightmare. The things had the torsos of human beings, though hideously shrunken from starvation and encrusted with scales of filth, but there all resemblance to mankind ceased. From shoulders and waist there twisted flaccid tentacles of unsupported flesh, the upper ones terminating in flat paddle-like flippers which had some remote resemblance to hands, the lower ones ending in almost shapeless stubs which resembled feet only in that each had a fringe of 5 shriveled, unsupported protuberances of withered flesh. On scrawny necks were balanced caricatures of faces, flat, noseless, chinless countenances with horrible crossed or divergent eyes, mouths widened almost beyond resemblance to buccal orifices, and horror of horrors, elongated, split tongues protruding several inches from the lips and wagging impotently in vain efforts to form words. Satan, thou art undone, the Grandin cried, as he held his candle before a scrap of paper decorating one of the cages after the manner of a sign before an animal's den at the zoo. Observe, he ordered, pointing a shaking finger at the notice. I looked, then recoiled, sick with horror. The paper bore the picture and name of Ellen Munro, one of the girls mentioned as missing in the newspaper article we had found in the dead man's bedroom. Beneath the photograph was scribbled in an irregular hand, paid 12th of May, 1897. Sick at heart, we walked down the line of pens. Each was labelled with the picture of a young and pretty girl with the notation paid, followed by a date. Every girl named as missing in the newspapers was represented in the cages. Last of all, in a coop somewhat smaller than the rest, we found a body more terribly mutilated than any. This was marked with the photograph and name of Dora Lee. Beneath her name was the date of her payment, written in bold red figures. Parbleu, what are we to do, my friend? The Grandin asked in a hysterical whisper. We cannot return these poor ones to the world. That would be the worst form of cruelty yet. Yet I shrink from the act of mercy I know they would ask me to perform if they could speak. Let's go up, I begged. We must think this thing over, de Grandin. And if I stay here any longer, I shall faint. Bien, he agreed, and turned to follow me from the cavern of horrors. It is to consider, he began as we reached the upper hall once more, if we give those so pitiful ones a stroke of mercy, we are murderers before the law. Yet what service could we render them by bringing them once more into the world? Our choice is a hard one, my friend. I nodded. Morbleu, but he was clever, that one, the Frenchman continued, half to me, half to himself. What a surgeon! 14 instances of Wyeth's amputation of the hip, and as many more of the shoulder, and every patient lived to suffer the tortures of that hellhole down there. But it is marvellous. None but a madman could have done it. Bethink you, friend Trowbridge, think how the mighty man of medicine brooded over the suicide of his crippled son, meditating hatred and vengeance for the heartless woman who had jilted him. Then, snap, went his great mentality, and from hating one woman he fell to hating all, to plotting vengeance against the many for the sin of the one. And Cordieu, what a vengeance! How he must have laid his plans to secure his victims, how he must have worked to prepare that hell under the earth to house those poor broken bodies which were his handiwork, and how he must have drawn upon the great surgical skill which was his, even in his madness, to transform those once lovely ones into visions of horror we have just beheld. Horror of horrors, to remove the bones and let the girl still live. He rose, pacing impatiently across the hall. What to do? What to do? He demanded, striking his open hands against his forehead. I followed his nervous steps with my eyes, but my brain was too numbed by the hideous things I had just seen to be able to respond to his question. I looked hopelessly past him at the angle of the wall by the great fireplace, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. Slowly but surely the wall was declining from the perpendicular. "The Grandin," I shouted, glad of some new phenomenon to command my thoughts. The wall's leaning." "Eh, the wall?" he queried. "Pardieu, yes! It is the rain, the foundations are undermined. Quick, quick, my friend, to the cellars. All those unfortunate ones are undone." We scrambled down the stairs leading to the basement, but already the earth floor was sopping with water. The well leading to the madman's sub-cellar was more than half full of bubbling, earthy ooze. "Mary, have pity," the Grandin exclaimed. "Like rats in a trap, they did die. God rest their tired souls." He shrugged his shoulders as he turned to retrace his steps. "It is better so. Now, friend Trowbridge, do you hasten aloft to bring down that girl from the room above. We must run for it if we do not wish to be crushed under the falling timbers of this house of abominations." The storm had spent itself, and a red springtime sun was peeping over the horizon as the Grandin and I trudged up my front steps with the mutilated girl stumbling wearily between us. "Put her to bed, my excellent one," the Grandin ordered Nora, my housekeeper, who came to meet us, enveloped in righteous indignation and an outsized flannel nightgown. "Parbleu, she has had many troubles." In the study, a glass of steaming whisky and hot water in one hand, a vile-smelling French cigarette in the other, he faced me across the desk. "How was it you knew not that house, my friend?" he demanded. I grinned sheepishly. "I took the wrong turning at the detour," I explained, "and got onto the Yerbishire Road. It's just recently been hard-surfaced, and I haven't used it for years because it was always impassable. Thinking we were on the Andover Pike all the while, I never connected the place with the old Olmsted mansion I'd seen hundreds of times from the road." "Ah, yes," he agreed, nodding thoughtfully. "A little turn from the right way, and poof, what a distance we have to retrace." "Now, about the girl upstairs," I began, but he waved the question aside. "The mad one had but begun his devil's work on her," he replied. "I, Jules de Grandin, will operate on her eyes and make them as straight as before, nor will I accept 1 penny for my work. Meantime, we must find her kindred and notify them she is safe and in good hands. And now," he handed me his empty tumbler, "a little more whiskey, if you please, friend Trowbridge."
Everybody dies, don't they?
Hope you've had time to recover from the story now. Thought I'd give you a few seconds before I put in the sales pitch. So, it's not. I'm not really selling you anything, to be honest, because you've just got what you wanted, and I know there are a number of people out in the world who simply can't, and not in a financial position to support my work. But this is my work, and this is how I earn my crust. So if you have enjoyed it, particularly if you've enjoyed a number of the stories, and you might think that you would like to make a contribution to my work, but let's be a bit quid pro quo about it, because there is a library of stories, 300 plus stories, going on 400 stories, which are completely ad free. I have it on a Google Drive, and I can send you a link to it so you can download all the stories and listen, and some of them are novel length as well, for the rest of your life pretty much. Well, maybe not, but you get the picture. So you do that by becoming a patron, and you pay $5 a month, I think. If you want the detective stories as well, it's $10 a month. But if you just want ghost stories, it's $5 a month now. If you're in a position to afford $5 and you think my work is worth that, and you're trying to keep real people like me in work rather than AI that actually doesn't need to eat, it doesn't have any children to look after, or dogs. So, what I would just say to you, if you think $5 a month is good value to support my work and get an ad-free library of stories, then sign up. There's a link somewhere. Become a patron, a Patreon. Become a patron. Help me out, and I'll help you out. How about that? By making more stories, of course. I probably won't come and do your gardening. So that was The House of Horror, not The House of Horrors by Seabury Quinn. I think I said The House of Horrors in the intro. It was published in 1926, and I'm going to tell you about Seabury, and I'm going to tell you about the story, what I think about the story. But first I think I need to explain how I come to choose stories, the scientific method with which I choose the stories. It goes like this. I've got a lot of books, and I browse through them. And actually, I feel oppressed by the amount of books I've got, so I'm always trying to get rid of some. So a lot of them, particularly with horror stories or ghost stories or supernatural stories, are anthologies. And so a number of them repeat the same stories. I can't refrain from buying them, but when I get them, I think, right, I'm going to do all the stories in this book, then I can give it away. I take them to a second-hand bookshop, and they give me some money for them, because I take a lot. So it's about as simple as that. Sometimes I look at a book, and I've got 3 massive St. Michael's books from the 1980s, 3 volumes, and I think they've got 60 stories in each, so it's going to take me most of my life to read through those. So that's number one. It's to kind of go through stories. Then the second thing I have is length. Length is a consideration. It can't be too long. Or too short either, and most of them tend to be about this length, but some are very long and some are too short, and I can do I've done short ones, and I've bundled a couple of short ones together in some instances, but mainly I avoid the short ones, the very short ones, like flash fiction-ish, and I avoid the long ones unless I'm sitting down to do a novel. And sometimes people suggest stories to me, and it turns out like there's 60,000 words, which is going to take me a long time to do. The books I've got, just browsing through them, the length. Then also I have a kind of a feeling for, because it's a broad church, this classic ghost story stuff, and it includes sort of pulp fiction, and it includes literary fiction, people like Henry James, Edith Wharton, and clever people like that, who are judged to be great writers. And then we have people who basically cobble together stories. The most sense. It's like the Times literary supplement versus TV Quick. The content, and some of the stuff, particularly in the pulp magazines, as you know, during the 20th century, really, there were a lot of amazing stories and stuff like that. Used to publish these pulp fiction, and a lot of the pulp writers, such as Lovecraft, who at his best rises above pulp, I think. Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, a lot of people like that, and published these pulp stories, and in many cases they don't really have literary merit. What do you mean by that, Tony? Well, a story can be really popular and sell a lot of copies without literary merit. And I tend to avoid the snobbery of stories. I don't really like it, but the truth of it is, somebody like, if you go on Amazon now, you'll see that Beethoven and Shakespeare have got a lot of 1-star reviews, but generally they probably have got something to have persisted over this time, and to have so many fans over the centuries. But I'm not against. But genre fiction at its best can be really fantastic. My eye was caught by Robert Holstock's Mythago Wood, and Dan Simmons got a book called Hyperion, and I'm seeing Ursula K. Le Guin and things like that. And these are great writers, and alongside them we have, I'm just looking at my bookshelf now, Lawrence Durrell. I like Lawrence Durrell a lot, this sort of modernist experimental fiction, and he was considered a great literary artist. And people like Cormac McCarthy, etc., etc. And I think I have got a kind of channel which I don't put much into, which is about literary short stories. And I'm going to say this, go out on a limb and say, in many cases, when you read one of those short stories, you're moved. You are emotionally moved by them, and that probably is what I mean by literary merit. And I think it's possible to do that with genre fiction. How do you do that? Because the writers who are talented are able to say something about the human condition and make us feel like we're involved in the story. It's not just something we're going to forget straight away. All stories manipulate emotion, and this genre, horror, particularly horror. I think this is actually a horror story. It's not a ghost story. It's a horror story. It manipulates the feelings of disgust, and disgust's a strong one, I think, and pity actually in this story as well, which is a good emotion to have, I think. Empathy for other people to an extent. I don't think it's strong empathy, but there is a bit of empathy there. You may disagree with me, so after all that, I ended up picking this story. So what I'm saying is, I looked at it. It was about the right length. I hadn't done much pulp. I thought, let's do a bit of pulp. And also, it's not in copyright. That's another really important thing, because I don't want to get, I've had my fingers burned a couple of times with this before, and so I thought, give it a shot. Now, also, another factor is I have to be mindful of, I tell you the two things which I realise, the three things which sell a story. So I might put a story up one week and 3,000 people listen to it. And I may put another story up the week after and 60,000 people listen to it, And so what is the difference? And why don't you do the 60,000 all the time, so you get all that ad revenue? Well, for the reasons I've said, sometimes I don't want to be literary, sometimes I don't want to be pulp, and so it isn't just guided by the amount of people that I'll see. And also, I'm also trying to do justice to the genre and try to illuminate different areas of supernatural fiction, or of this wide range of horror stroke supernatural fiction. And I like to, there are many cases. I mean, I was really gutted. There's two people who I have, Ray Bradbury and Robert Aikman, really important writers. I can't read their stories because of copyright issues, which is a real shame, because I think is part of the mission, if you like, of the channel. It is to kind of introduce people to the wide breadth of work that exists. Anyway, getting back to the point. So, what is the difference between 3,000 and 60,000? There are three things that seem to happen. One is the name of the author, if it's a famous author, or even a famous book. But in this case, most of the stories, aren't necessarily famous. Some are, but mostly by now not. So it's the name of the author. If it is an Edith Wharton, that will draw people in. If it is a Robert Aikman, let's say, it would have drawn people in. Ramsey Campbell, I don't do his work for copyright reasons, which is a shame, because he's really good. He's got a lot to say. I think he's really important in this to understand the genre. But So the author, number one. Secondly, the title. You know, if you ever do copywriting courses, there is such a thing as power words. There are certain words which have an emotional valence, which is more. So, you know, chocolate probably has some, but, you know, peanut really probably doesn't have much. But passion flower, oh yeah, secret, mystery, horror. Those are word castle. Those are words. Secret, history, secret, mystery, horror. Are good ones on the detective channel, mystery and adventure, but on the ghost, horror is a big one. So here we are, the House of Horror. Also, haunted houses, a big draw. So the final thing, author, title, third thing is the thumbnail, the picture. If I put a story about a haunted house with a picture of a character in it, say Jules de Grandin, it won't attract the same number of listeners or viewers. It won't. If I put a story that isn't really about a haunted house, but put a haunted house picture on it, like a gloomy haunted house, that will. A great case in point is The Jolly Corner by Henry James, which I did. Okay, Henry James may have drawn some people, but it was the thumbnail picture of the spooky house that worked, I think, for that one. And so it is no secret. You're going to look at the thumbnail. Yeah, I've chosen a haunted house. I think it's legit because it is about a house of horror. So I think it's not too clickbaity. What's the definition of clickbait? Clickbait is getting people to click and not because you're promising them something and you don't come through with the promise. So if I had a story about a dog and a cat and had a picture of a haunted house on it, and you clicked on it, you might very well go, I'm disappointed now. Where's the haunted house? Whereas I think there is a kind of a house of horror in this. So there is a malevolent looking house in it. So I think it's okay. So those are the things. Let's talk about. Yeah, okay. So why am I even talking about this? I'll tell you why. Because as I'm getting into the story, I do kind of look at it, I try it out in my mouth, and I thought, yeah, I'm ready for a comic story. I've done a few comic stories, The House in Goblin Wood, Honeysuckle Cottage, the Canterville Ghost, the Ghost Ship. Anyway, I won't just list them, but I've done a few comic stories, and there is definitely a place in this genre for comic stories, a bit like the Terry Pratchett in the fantasy stories. There is a place for comedy. And you know, old Jules de Grandin's, he's ridiculous, you know, what's the word, exhalations or whatever, that isn't the word, in French. I mean, they're stupid. Le nom de Dieu de le nom de Dieu. You know, what? L'homme de Dieu de le nom de Dieu. What? I said, what? So they're ridiculous. And he was like a manic Hercule Poirot. Instead of Hercule Poirot's neat little black moustache, this guy's got a blonde one. Same crack though. And so I thought, I thought I can do it with the character, I think he's an American author, but it's sort of Britishy. It's not, because he talks about the state penitentiary, but you know, I think it's okay to do it with a British accent. So I did this posh English bloke versus this manic Frenchman. Both are accents which are inauthentic. Neither of them is mine. Both of them are caricatures. And then I thought, well, the girl herself, you know, there she is, this pretty damsel in distress with the frog eyes. Le grand œil. I will make her from Liverpool, but this extraordinary, you know what they say, the Liverpool accent. So you've got to get into it. You have to say things like "Tjechen Gori" and "Gaan hoog, please." You know, so that's Jimmy Carr. That's how he does it. And the Geordie one, if you're interested, is "Puba Scuba." Umba lumba. So you just say those things, you get into the accent. Anyway, so I thought, yeah. And so I'm going along with the comedy, and of course the evil bloke. It's very caricatured, isn't it? Very gothic. The car breaks down. Oh, right. Oh, they get lost. Oh, yeah, on a stormy night. Oh, yeah, and they find this neglected mansion that he doesn't recognise. Oh, here we are. It is just it's Addams Family stuff, isn't it? And then this bloke comes who's creepily oily, and then the damsel in distress is so gothic so far, and it's all very comic. And I'm going, yeah, this is okay. And then I'm getting towards the end of the story, and I'm realising, actually, this is really disturbing. This is really disturbing what this man is doing, and what we, the whole imagery, not just the grotesquerie of it, but the whole issue that this man hunts basically innocent random women, and does this because of some perceived slight to his son. There's a documentary in the UK at the moment called Adolescence, which is exploded really, and the story in that, no spoilers, but it's about toxic masculinity, and it's about harm to women and all of that kind of thing. Now, I know, because the world is so polarized, on the one hand, when I've said that, I have women who are very, very angry and full of rage, and on the other hand, I have men who feel that it's gone too far, that men are being blamed for being complete bastards and monsters, and they're not all, it's like some are, but so you need to sit down, derage yourself, because that isn't what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how I'm getting into this story, and I'm in this milieu. I'm kind of thinking, I'm already been a bit. I've watched this Adolescence. I'm aware of the arguments back and forward. I've read a number of the articles and blog posts people and newspaper articles people have written about it one way or the other, and I'm like, actually, this, I am slightly uncomfortable about this. The grotesquerie of it, of him amputating the hips and creating these torso. They wouldn't live really, would they? They wouldn't live. They wouldn't be viable. But and paid, and it's just, if you want to go a bit far into that, that's fairly horrific. It is horrific. It's like, whoa. It is very. I found it quite disturbing, and I'm aware that I've been playing it for laughs up until this point, and I'm kind of stuck because I've done 4/5 of the story, and I'm thinking, ooh, I'm not comfortable with this story, but I've gone too far, I've sunk my time into it, and I don't think it's an irredeemable story, because there's no way that it's condoned. Our heroes, who don't actually do anything much, do they? I mean, they're the protagonists, but do they protag? They don't really protagging, are they? They don't really do anything. They just turn up. I mean, the guy gets himself killed by stealing the car, and the bizarre thing is that old Jules is more appalled by, he sees the punishment being due. He has a bit of empathy towards the girls at the end, but and then this whole question of, let's euthanize them because it's the best thing. I'm like, there's some debates to be had there, I think. I mean, if that's opening a can of worms, which I don't really want to open, but I mean, I think it's and maybe that's cowardly of me, really. Anyway, I think it probably is cowardly of me. I again was listening to this woman talking about death in Canada, assisted dying in Canada, and she was very against it, and her arguments, I only heard her side of the story, to be fair, but her ads were shocking. And remember, I spent most of my last 20 years persuading people not to kill themselves, and her view was that the state was quite happy to kill people now, and I'm like, but this is counter to everything. I would be telling people that their lives were worth living, that there was always hope, that things would get better, and her message was, I have got into it, haven't I? The state is basically saying, it's going to be expensive to treat you, it might not work, you're going to be in a lot of pain, let's just kill you. And that is a gross simplification, but I appreciate that she's partisan, but this idea of euthanizing these sad, tragic women, who of course aren't real, it didn't really happen, but you could argue that things do happen. But yeah, okay, things do happen. But in this story, let's stick to the story. So I was uncomfortable about that. It was horrible, and I remember why I like cozy ghost stories as escapist tales, and I'm not massively a horror fan as such. Chainsaw Massacre is not for me. The Human Caterpillar, not for me. Saw, not for me. But M.R. James, yes. Anyway, okay, let me tell you about Seabury Quinn, because I think he's an interesting guy. Seabury Grandin Quinn. Now, did he... I don't know if he adopted that name or actually he chose Jules de Grandin, because that was his name. Anyway, he was born in 1889. He was also known as Jerome Burke, and he was a lawyer in the US, journalist and author of Pulp Fiction. Although he was initially more popular than H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard, his name has largely faded, and he was very prolific. And at the time, he had this occult detective. This is a whole subgenre. Arising from, and I'm going to say this probably a bit later on, we've got to thank Edgar Allan Poe for this as for many other things. The grotesquerie we find in Poe is related to this in sorts of ways, and I'm going to try and set out how. So of course the simplistic way is Poe writes the first detective stories and he's a French detective, Auguste Dupin, and he does Murders in the Rue Morgue, and I've done that on the Detective Channel. And Poe also writes horror stories, A Telltale Heart, Cask of Amontillado, if I said that right, is they're horror stories. And so Poe is the father of both in some way. In most ways, he's the father of both the detective, and so therefore the occult detective is a hybrid between the two. And there've been many occult detectives, Kanaki and all sorts of things like that, but a number of them. I'm not a massive fan of occult detectives. I like detectives and I like occult, but I don't like necessarily occult detectives. It just feels too contrived for me. But anyway, Jules de Grandin, so owe something to Poe. Now, let's take a sidestep from Edgar Allan Poe. We're starting with him, and we're talking about Charles Baudelaire. So there's a big French flavour to this. So Charles Baudelaire, the decadent French poet, he translated Poe's stuff into French, and there is this grotesque horror mutilation is a feature of French horror, French literature. I'm not a specialist in French literature at all, but there is the decadent, but also the sensation novels where lots of these things happen. Anyway, so put the French to one side. I don't think it's completely unrelated that the detective here is French. Also, the Germans liked him as well, liked Seabury Quinn, and there were two translations of this story, The House of Horror in German, Das Haus des Schreckens, The House of Screams, and Der Knochenschäler, which seems to be bone peeler. Knoch, I think, my German isn't fantastic enough to say that, but yeah, so the Germans liked it as well. So, this does appeal to Europeans. Let's still get back to Seabury. So there we are. He was prolific. He was a pulp writer. He was a lawyer as well and a journalist. And he was born in Washington, D.C. on New Year's Day in 1889. And his family was comfortably off. His father was also called Seabury Quinn. He was a lawyer. And he followed in his father's footsteps. And in the US, as I understand, professionals like lawyers and doctors are very well rewarded financially. Not as such in the UK. I mean, they don't do badly in the UK, but I think in the US, doctors and lawyers do earn a packet. So he became a lawyer. He had got a law degree in the National University Law School in 1910. He was admitted to the District of Columbia Bar and practiced law, specialising in probate law. This legal expertise, my notes say, gave him a unique perspective on death, inheritance, and the darker aspects of human nature. Well, I think if you're involved in wills, you certainly learn about... I haven't got any personal experience of this, but of how people fall out. My personal experience is working on older adults' wards in hospital and having older adults die and seeing some of the families, how they behaved, which wasn't very endearing or enlightening or nice. Anyway, so he served in the First World War, After his military service, he moved from law to a career that combined his legal knowledge with his growing interest in writing. He became the editor of a group of trade papers in New York, where he also taught medical jurisprudence. So what is that? Jurisprudence is the law about, medico-legal ethics and stuff like that. I was always really interested in that. During this time, he began writing technical articles and increasingly pulp fiction. So his first published works include The Law of the Movies, 1917, in the Motion Picture magazine, and Demons of the Night, 1918, in Detective Story magazine. And that was his thing. Pulp magazines were his thing. So in 1925, everybody has a detective, and if you follow the detective fiction, writers tend to create a detective. Think of Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, but also, Jules de Grandin, Auguste Dupin, and all these dudes. And de Grandin was his, and his loyal American assistant, who I made, rather posh Englishman, Dr. Samuel Trowbridge. So they investigate supernatural menaces with a blend of erudition, deductive reasoning, and fervent belief in the power of good. These stories ran for 26 years. They ran until 1951, and they were really popular. And at one time, half the stuff in the pulps was his. He was so prolific. The longest of the stories with Jules Grandin, if you move to go and buy it, is The Devil's Bride, 1932, which was influenced by Robert W. Chambers' Slaves' Souls. And he continued, although he was really successful as a writer, he remained a technical journalist with trade journals. He became a government lawyer in World War II. He made significant contributions to the field of mortuary jurisprudence. Now, if you were a specialist in that field, you probably know his name. He taught this subject at mortuary schools for many years and served as the editor of Casket and Sunnyside, a leading trade journal for the funeral industry. I wasn't aware that they had. I mean, I guess they must have had one, but he contributed to the American Funeral Director, and using the Jerome Burke pseudonym, the Dodge magazine. I hope he didn't get his articles mixed up. So, his stories were very popular, but have received some less glowing reviews by modern reviewers. They find the plots rather undistinguished, stereotyped characters, and poorly resolved plots. Well, I think the plot resolved in this one, but I mean, the characters are pretty stereotyped. But, he was in with that circle of Robert E. Howard, H.P. Lovecraft, and Clark Ashton Smith. He was also a friend of fellow writer Mary Elizabeth Councilman, who wrote his obituary. He died in 1969, and after he died, 1977 was published Alien Flesh with Stephen Fabian, which has been described as a sexually explicit erotic fantasy. He had one child, Seabury Quinn Jr. So of course this is Seabury Quinn was his granddad's name as well, with his first wife, and the son worked in the theatre and had degrees from Harvard and Yale. Yeah, and established, I've got these notes. His son established the Seabury Quinn Jr. Playwrights Festival in Athens, Ohio. So that's him. Well, let's say something about the story. We've kind of touched on it, but so it came out in 1926 in Weird Tales. So one of the Gothic themes that we see is moral corruption and the abuse of science. So stories that pop into my head, of course, Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, written just over 100 years before this one. But also Ray Edwards' Sardonicus, not the House of Dr. Sardonicus, or the Seven Spirits of Dr. Sardonicus. That's a Spirit LP. Sardonicus, and this. I think there is a tradition of medicine and horror and horrific doctors doing horrific things. There is something, because we're all probably frightened of going under the knife, and we have to trust our surgeon, and if the surgeon is kind of perverted, that's a bit scary. So revenge and its destructive consequences. His lust for revenge, you may think, Dr. Marston, you may think that his revenge was completely out of proportion. I think I would think that, and he must have been fairly crackers. Anyway, I mean, we've all been jilted, and I know it's really sad, and we've all had our hearts broken. And some of us, do take it so badly that, and I've come across this, that people do take their own lives. It's very, very sad. And you can understand. One of the things is that parents, again, this is serious stuff, but there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of hostility. There's great violence around and in suicide, and it ricochets around all the people involved. I used to say, remember, I spent 20 years trying to talk people out of doing it. People would typically come to me and go, nobody cares, or nobody will miss me. They'll say they'll be better off without me. And I would say to them, look, I've worked with families of people who have that horrible phrase, completed suicide, and I've never met any of the family go, do you know what, we're better off without them. I said, and I used to say this, I said, it's like, you may think there's lots of people who don't care about you, you'd be right, you may have enemies in the world, you may have people who've done you down, who've bullied you, all those sorts of things, and they will hear of your death and they'll go, oh yeah, right, yeah, who knows what emotion, if they're particularly wicked, they may even be pleased. But what it's like is getting everybody who loves you into a room and letting off a hand grenade, because you will blow their lives up. And so his son did that, so I understand. I'm trying to explore the motivation. I'm not sure Seabury Quinn gives much depth to the motivation of the father. I mean, the father, why does he steal the motor car? And what a coincidence it is that the tree falls on him and snaps his spine, and he lives long enough to give a little explanation about what he's done. And then they find the papers. I mean, it's a sort of cobbled together story, really. But yes, but to do what he did, perhaps. So here we are. I think we're given this beans and chips story. That is to say, it's a very simple meal of baked beans and French fries with a bit of tomato sauce. It's a common meal. It's an easy meal. It's a kind of junk food meal. But we like it. I love a bit of beans and chips, particularly with a fried egg. And we're given this, and then I'm sitting here thinking, oh yeah, let's talk about the symbolism and the key themes, and it maybe doesn't go any deeper than that. The characters, there is no motivation. We can kind of think, oh yes, well, the father was so disturbed by his son's suicide that, and it may be just that it just is skin deep. It is just there for the sense. You remember the distinction between spectacle and what's its opposite? I don't know. So spectacle has no depth and no meaning. It's just there for the shock value, for the it doesn't point to anything other than itself. It doesn't lead you anywhere. It just gives you that. And of course, this is the great criticism of Gothic fiction and genre fiction. It doesn't do anything. It's just like, boom, here's the car chase, here's the gun, here's the sexy scene, and it goes and doesn't go any further. Here's the murder, it doesn't go any further. That's it. It's only there for that cheap stirring up of emotions without actually exploring anything deeper. I think that's what we've got here. I think the horribleness is merely to be horrible. And so this talks about the sensation novel. So the sensation novel, which was big in France, is purely about shocking events, extreme emotions, and transgressive behaviour. If you read any, and I don't read much of it, if you read any reviews or literary blah blah about stories these days, we're often talking about transgressive. If you read about the Gothic, it's about how transgressive it is. That is to say, it does things that people don't like. It does unusual things that are a bit grotesque and a bit out of the way, and a bit, ooh, why did you do that, you freak? And it's merely to shock. It's like there was a guy, right, one of our patients, we used to go and see him at his house. And he was disturbed, so I wouldn't have been seeing him. He was having a massive tattoo done on his back. Don't be shocked about this. This is the real world. This is what people are like. And it was of the Incredible Hulk. So far so good. Ripping his shirt off. So far so good. Incredible Hulk had no trousers on, and the Incredible Hulk was tumescent. And we said to him, you cannot go out with your shirt off when there are children and people around. You can't do it. And there was I was at a concert the other day. There was a guy wandering around with a T-shirt on that had kind of offensive words on it, like F you with an F. I can't even say what it is, but it was like, and that is just transgressive. That's just like punching you in the face, metaphorically. So these kind of stories do that because they get I, as a YouTuber, which I am, and a podcaster, I get all these comments, and most of them are lovely, some of them aren't, and I realise that some of it is just rage bait. And people go around giving rage bait to people to just, it's a cheap emotion, isn't it? To make you blow up. It's easily done. And a lot of these strong emotions are just easy to do, and I think this is what this story's doing. And this grotesquerie, I keep coming back to that word at the end, it's just transgressive. It is. Talking about I used to work with this psychiatrist who I had a lot of time for. And sometimes we'd have patients come into the hospital and ask an accident emergency, and they would have slashed themselves up. And in a number of cases, they were they'd done it with objects like glass, and they'd not done it, and they'd done it, and they refused sutures, and they would present these wounds to people. And he said to me, they are assaulting you. It is, this transgressive behaviour is an assault. It is their anger. So I said I wasn't going to analyse the story. I wonder about Seabury Quinn. But the other way to look at it is, I've said this before, your darkness has to get out somewhere. And what better, I mean, I write horror stories, so what better, and I like to think I'm a nice fella, what better place is to get this darkness out of you in a kind of a safe way. You get the filthy blackness out of you, but in a way that he's done here. So it is horrible, but it isn't as bad as actually going out and murdering people. Right, I did mention there's a thing called contes cruels. So the conte cruel is a French term, and we've got this French thing going on. It emerges as a distinct literary genre in the late 19th century and is closely associated with French decadence. We talked about Baudelaire and decadence and the death they owe to Edgar Allan Poe. So there's a French author called Auguste Villiers d'Isle-Adam, who truly crystallised the genre with his 1883 collection called Contes Cruels, Cruel Stories. So they were characterised by sardonic wit, psychological insight, and often shocking and disturbing content. I don't think Seabury Quinn has much psychological insight. His humour is a bit, not slapstick, but it's fairly turned up sort of loud volume humour, isn't it? Flat-footed humour, we might say. I enjoyed it, but I like that. So, and after Villiers d'Isle-Adam, lead, other French authors began to explore this genre. Octave Mirbeau writes Le Jardin du Supplice, The Torture Garden, 1899, which pushed the boundaries of acceptability with its graphic descriptions of violence and eroticism. The two go close together. People like Saki, who we did The Open Door, sometimes has short stories blending wit, cruelty, and the supernatural. And Saki's stories aren't actually called Contes Cruels, but also Roald Dahl has some moral ambiguity and shocking twists. Some of the stuff that happens in his stories is actually cruel, and also an interesting point when I'm going through my notes is the Contes Cruels have it's said that M. Night, I can't say his name, Shyamalan, yeah, M. Night Shyamalan. I like his stories, I just can't say his name. And there's some influence there. So we have the Contes Cruels, and then we have another thing which I wanted to talk about, which was there's this French theatre. Well, I find my notes and I'm scooting around. So the French are very keen on this. From 1897 to 1962, that late, there was a place called the Théâtre du Grand Guignol, if I've said that right. and it was deliberately unsettling and originates in this late decadent period. Often graphic depictions of violence, horror, and the macabre. Melodrama, sensationalism, and explicit gore were very French, but they weren't doing it for cheap thrills. Well, they were, but it was a deliberate attempt. It was very arty to push the boundaries of what was considered acceptable on stage, exploring the darker aspects of the human psyche and confronting audiences with the realities of violence, mental illness, and death, very much like we've been talking about. Plays often featured scenes of torture, mutilation, and psychological breakdown, rendered with a startling degree of realism through the use of special effects, makeup, and skilled acting. So this intense emotion and dramatic tension was delivered through typically short, sharp plays designed to provoke a visceral reaction from the audience. It aimed to shock, disturb, and even terrify, but also sought to engage the audience on an emotional level, forcing them to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature and the fragility of existence. While often criticised for its sensationalism and exploitation of violence, the Grand Guignol also served as a unique form of social commentary, reflecting anxieties and obsessions of its time and influencing subsequent developments in horror cinema and literature. It did. So there we are, unsettling truths. You may have your opinion that we can live without them, to be honest. There's enough unsettling stuff in the world. Let's read stories about summer days and puppy dogs and ice creams instead. Saying which, I've just finished Adam S. Leslie's book, Lost in the Garden. Fantastic book, loved it. I've done a little video about how much I loved it, and I would recommend you go and read it. If you like folk horror, if you like English folk horror, it's a great book. Anyway, this wasn't folk horror, this was just horror, but I like to keep it varied.
Everybody dies, don't they? Everybody come back, don't they? Isn't that so?
You tried to get into the locked drawer today, didn't you?
How do the dead come back, Mother? What's the secret of the dead come back? Everybody dies, don't they? Everybody come back, don't they? Isn't that so?
Isn't that so? Isn't that so? Isn't that so?